Ethan thought he had finally found peace. After years of living in crowded cities, he had chosen a quiet lakeside estate where the water shimmered like glass and tall trees swayed in the breeze. It was supposed to be his sanctuary, a place for morning coffee on the porch, fishing at dusk, and neighbors who waved kindly across trimmed lawns. But almost immediately his dream began to crack. The HOA, led by a sharp-tongued president named Linda, stormed into his life just days after he moved in. They claimed his lake wasn't really his at all. Ethan didn't yet know. He held the key to their precious docks. Ethan moved in on a cool spring morning. The estate had been neglected for years, its wooden porch slightly weathered, its boathouse leaning but still charming. For him, that made it more special. It was a place with history. The lake stretched out behind his house, so still it looked painted. He imagined quiet evenings spent on the dock, watching the sun melt into the water. At first, the neighbors seemed curious but polite. Cars slowed as they passed by his driveway. Some waved, others simply stared. Ethan chalked it up to small-town curiosity. That afternoon, a woman in a crisp blazer walked over, introducing herself as Linda, president of the Lakeside HOA. Her smile was polished but cold. "We like to keep this community organized," she said, giving his boathouse a critical glance. Ethan assured her he planned to restore everything carefully. She nodded, then casually remarked, "Of course, you'll need to follow our rules regarding lake use." The remark struck him as odd. His realtor had been clear. The lake was deeded with his estate. Still, he brushed it off. He was new here. Maybe it was just small talk. Little did he know, Linda's comment was only the beginning of a storm. Just 3 days later, Ethan heard footsteps crunching across his gravel driveway. Looking out, he saw 5 HOA board members marching up like soldiers, with Linda leading the pack. Ethan stepped outside, still holding his coffee mug. "We need to talk," Linda announced without greeting. The others stood behind her, arms crossed. "This lake," she continued, gesturing toward the sparkling water, "is community property. You can't just assume it's yours. The docks, the shoreline, the boating, it all falls under HOA management." Ethan frowned. "That's not what I was told. The estate deed includes the lake." Linda's eyes narrowed. "You're mistaken. We've managed this lake for years. You're expected to comply with our guidelines." The confrontation stunned him. He hadn't even unpacked half his boxes. Yet here was an entire board telling him what he could and couldn't do with his own property. "I'll review my documents," Ethan replied evenly. "But I'm not agreeing to anything until I'm certain." Linda crossed her arms, her voice sharpening. "You'll find out soon enough. We run this neighborhood and the lake isn't yours to control." With that, they turned and left as abruptly as they had arrived, leaving Ethan standing. In his own driveway, the morning sun suddenly feeling colder. The days that followed grew tense. Ethan noticed neighbors looking at him differently, whispers exchanged at mailboxes, heads shaking as he walked by. A flyer appeared in his mailbox one morning, printed with bold letters, "Community alert, new resident refusing HOA regulations." Lake at risk. It was signed by the HOA board. Ethan's stomach tightened. They were painting him as the problem. Soon after, letters began arriving, each marked violation notice. They accused him of unauthorized use of community property and warned of mounting fines. The absurdity was almost laughable. He hadn't done anything but fish from his own dock. Instead of panicking, Ethan quietly collected everything, his deed, maps, and county records. At night, under the warm glow of a desk lamp, he pored over each page. Something told him the truth was in the details. Meanwhile, the isolation grew. One evening, he waved at a neighbor watering her flowers. She turned away without acknowledgement. The friendly small town he had imagined felt like a cage closing in. Still, Ethan refused to bend. The more the HOA pushed, the more determined he became to uncover exactly what was his and what wasn't. He wasn't just protecting a lake. He was protecting his right to exist in peace. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. Ethan stepped outside, coffee in hand, only to hear laughter and music drifting across the water. His dock, was covered with HOA members holding a barbecue. He walked down calmly, but his voice was firm. "You can't be here without permission." Linda, flipping a burger, didn't even look at him. "This is community space, Ethan. You can't block residents from enjoying their own lake." "It's not your lake," he shot back, "and this dock is on my property." The group went silent, all eyes turning to the standoff. Linda's expression hardened, her voice rising. "Selfishness won't be tolerated here. You're new, and you clearly don't understand how things work. We've always had access, and we'll continue to have it." Ethan stared at them, his patience thinning. "Then you'd better be prepared to answer for trespassing." Gasps rippled among the group, but Linda just glared. The confrontation drew clear battle lines. By sundown, the whole neighborhood had heard about it. For Ethan, the lake that once promised peace now shimmered with tension, but deep inside, a resolve began to form. That night, Ethan sat surrounded by maps and papers. His eyes lingered on an old survey document, the ink slightly faded. Something caught his attention, a note about easements and access rights. He leaned closer, tracing the lines with his finger. And then it hit him. The HOA's docks weren't built on public land at all. They extended into the shoreline deeded with his estate. Every plank, every nail of their so-called community docks rested on his property lines. His heart raced. All this time, they had been threatening him about the lake, but the truth was reversed. Their entire access to the lake depended on his permission. Without it, they had nothing but a view from afar. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading. The balance of power had shifted overnight. For the first time since moving in, he wasn't the one on the defensive. The HOA thought they could bully him. Instead, they had built their foundation, literally, on his land. He began organizing the evidence, preparing copies, highlighting key notes. The next meeting would not go the way Linda expected. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, packed with residents buzzing with anticipation. Linda stood at the front, already mid-speech about protecting community assets. Then Ethan stepped forward, carrying a thick folder. He waited for silence, then spread the documents across the table. "These are county records, surveys, and deeds," he announced. "They prove two things. First, that the lake is deeded with my estate. Second, that the docks you've been claiming as communal property sit entirely within my boundary lines." Gasps echoed through the room. Neighbors leaned forward, whispering. Linda's face paled. That's not possible. We've always..." Ethan cut her off gently but firmly. "Tradition doesn't override property law. You've been trespassing. And if you continue, I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action." The board members glanced nervously at one another. Linda tried to salvage her authority, but her words faltered under the weight of the proof. For once, Ethan felt the room tilt in his favor. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any threat Linda could make. In the days after the meeting, everything changed. The threatening letters stopped. The flyers disappeared. A few neighbors quietly approached Ethan, apologizing for how they had treated him. They admitted Linda had convinced them he was reckless. When in truth she had been the one overreaching, Ethan made his stance clear. "The lake and docks are mine. If the community wants access, it will be on written terms we all agree on. No more intimidation." Though some resentment lingered, respect followed. The HOA, once loud and overbearing, grew silent around him. Even Linda retreated, her authority diminished. One evening, Ethan sat on his porch as the sun dipped below, the horizon, painting the lake in gold. The water shimmered as it had on his first day, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't just beautiful. It was his, and no one could take that away. The sanctuary he had sought was finally real. He had stood against the storm, and in the end, the water was calm again.